Good morning. My name is Brett Scharffs, and I'm the director of the International Center for Law and Religion Studies. And it's my pleasure to chair this session on academic perspectives on the theme of our conference, which is freedom of thought, conscience, and belief at the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Could I ask someone to shut the door in the back? We have three speakers, and I'm looking forward to hearing from each of them. We'll begin with Professor Do Quang Hưng, former director of the Religion and Rule of Law Center in Vietnam. What that title doesn't tell you is that he has been our friend and partner for nearly 20 years, working together on more than 20 conferences in Vietnam, both at the University of Social Sciences and Humanities, at the Academy of World Religions, in the Vietnamese Academy of Social Sciences, in the Vietnam National University, and in partnership with the Ho Chi Minh Academy of Law and Politics. He is the translator of the casebook that Cole Durham and I wrote on law and religion into Vietnamese. And we've used this casebook in our training and teaching programs in Vietnam for many years. And just this month, a new book was published called Religion and the Rule of Law in Vietnam and Southeast Asia. And this is a collection of essays written by Dr. Do, by my senior partner and the founding director of our center, Cole Durham, and myself. And so this is an 800-page book with a lot of the learning that we have done over the last 20 years.
Hello, every friends and family. I'm very honored to be present here. Please let me speak in Vietnamese, and thank you, the friends that are interpreting, to help me to pass the challenge of language here. Dear friends, I think in the thought in this small breakout group about Southeast Asia and the new goals, I want to say these things. I want to say this thing. In the society here in Vietnam, there are no deal with the secular society. So the right to freedom of religion, it's very tightly together. We are living in an idea that we nations and other nations and the right of the freedom, thought, conscience, and religion, etc. Those are very important. But I ask for your permission. Personally, I think we don't need to ignore something that's very important. That is the speech of World War about secularity in we've discussed in France. That means, what does that mean? We see that in religion, freedom, and secular society. I think that the Southeast Asia, we are very special. We want to understand, for example, Europe and Australia and the United States in the year 20th century, always, like if now, in today's present, in this secular society, they want to escape religion. They want to escape religion. These are famous sayings. So during that time, the people in Southeast Asia, that include Vietnam, that's the opposite. We're not like that. So for this opportunity, I want to talk about this. My logic is very simple. The first, we want to agree with you about the like my personal the condition of secularity in Southeast Asia. If you pay attention, I say the data, the index shows that in 2008, I see that in the Southeast Asia, very small, very low. Four index number, secular, and the index on the index of religion or national socialism. But on the secularism is very small. The index about secularism is very low too. For this point, it helps me to recognize that the South Asian, it's been a long time. Nobody turned back about secularism. Yeah, but in reality, it's very hardship in secularity in Asia, according to the information. I want to raise the second point is that we are in Asia to enter the secularism. There are three challenges. The first one is that your relationship between secularism and the people. It's a very important thing because on a big religion in Southeast Asia, the goal is how do you get the government, the religion and the government, and you have to recognize the basic human, basic naturalism. The civic naturalism, I want to say that. And then the nationalism, civil nationalism. The first one is very interesting in this. The Southeast Asia, that is the civil secularism. It is very important, special, important. We spend many energy in that civic nationalism that we need to keep separate. The challenge there is the second that I want to express my thought is that in like this. Secularism, how does it help the religion in Vietnam? There are three things. The last one is that secularism, they establish a relationship between individualism, religion, and the state, and they create the civilism and the freedom to religion. How does it accomplish? That is the result. We don't have time, but I recognize that in today, this relation, a complex relationship in Southeast Asia, have many challenges. The people don't agree on the community. This is a very important. The third point is that regarding thoughts, we Asian have to get used to the individual socialism. It's in your blood or not. Do they hunger to make this happen? That's two items. I want to change to the third, the last one. Asia has what improvement have we have into the road to secularism? There are four. The first one is in the Southeast Asia, we're very secularism. Vietnamese Secularism is big in Vietnam. Now we see it in many forms. From what I see, Indonesia on I like this in the third thing is that, like I just said before, the secularism and ritualism, they're very complicated, and it developed into many ways. For that reason, the important thing is that I like the sentence in 1963. He said, the soft secularism, the flexible secularism must have the religion part of the religion. It was written in 1963. In the circumstance of today, I see that social of the religious is very hard between secularism and religiosity. In the relationship between religion in Southeast Asia, unemployment, Social Security, immigration, abortion, LBG, lot is still far away, but a lot are good already. I only 1 minute, so I want to reserve for Vietnam. I will say that there are several things the secularism in Vietnam. First is that in Southeast Asia, the religion is very high. It's very high. In Vietnam, secularism is also high in Southeast Asia, but we direction. It looks like Lenin teaching, but now we're changing it to after 30 years, we are moving to diversity, cooperation, and harmony. Southeast Asia are like that. One more point is that my country, to resolve the religious, we have the system. We follow the teaching of Ho Chi Minh. We just need to unify in a religion. That is the thinking. We have a saying, whether you have religion or non-religion, live good, beauty in religion. I tried to do that in English, but I could not translate into English. Live a good life, and your religion will be beautiful. Last thing, this is the harmony between secularism and religion. That's what I recognize. I am out of time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Do. If we have a few minutes at the end, we'll ask you to say a few more words about the Vietnamese model. In our experience working with Dr. Do, we've seen him as a very strong advocate for moving away from rigid and harsh versions of secularism into what he was describing as the softer and the more flexible secularity, which is also a version of the secular state, but one that's much more open to pluralism and to diversity. So, Dr. Do, thank you for your presentation here today. Our next speaker is Bernard Malik. He is the president of the Research and Policy House in Australia. He is also the director of the American College in Queensland, Australia, and is an accomplished higher education leader with extensive experience in vocational education and training. He is many things, including an Indian national, an Australian resident, and a special envoy to the Prime Minister of Papua New Guinea. And we're looking forward to his conversation with us about religious freedom in Papua New Guinea, challenges and opportunities. But please, Bernard, feel free to be as expansive as you'd like.
Good morning, friends. I salute you, for you have taken long and inconvenient journeys to come here. I also want to thank International Center for Law and Religion Studies for undertaking such seminars every year. It's interesting that we celebrate 75 years of Human Rights Declaration. And I want to relate it to another country where it has been 75 years of freedom, India, where I come from originally. India is a secular country with 1.4 billion people, the largest democracy by nature, a secular nation. India got independence in 1947 from Britain, and they divided us into two countries, India and Pakistan. And in 1948, we signed the Declaration for Universal Declaration for Human Rights. Interestingly, both have traveled together. More than celebrating the declaration, we need to measure the results it has produced. India has majority Hindu nation, 79% Hindus live there, 14% Muslims, and 2.3% Christians. Freedom of religion in India is a fundamental right guaranteed by the Constitution of India, by its Article 25 that says, the freedom of religion, freedom of conscience, freedom to profess, practice, and propagate religion to all citizens. In 1976, India made an amendment to its constitution and added the word secular to it. India has largely been tolerant of religious freedom until 2014, when the current government got elected. It is a far-right Hindu nationalist government under Prime Minister Modi. It was okay until 2017, the BJP came to power in Uttar Pradesh, the largest state that has 200 million people in one state. Hindu cleric and a hardliner, Yogi Adityanath, became the chief minister, surprising everyone. Things went south, then onwards for Muslims, other minorities, including Christians. Major human rights violations started taking place on a regular basis. With priest Father Stan. Father Stan was 84-year-old when he was arrested after planting evidence on his laptop. He was denied bail time and over again, even when so many human rights organizations had intervened, including various Catholic bishops' associations, Indian, Philippines, and many other associations involved. Father Stan was also denied a straw to drink in prison because he had Parkinson's and he couldn't hold a bottle. He technically died in police custody in 2021. Reports of political prisoners, instances of censorship of media, as late as yesterday, 12 senior journalists who were perhaps not very supportive of the government policies were raided. Their computers were taken, their phones were taken, and hopefully they will be arrested soon. Among many things that happened, Muslims have been flogged for under the accusation that they have disrespected the Hindu gods. Christians have been beaten up under the accusation that they are forcing conversions on Hindus. Manipur is a classic example. It is a Christian majority state in eastern part of India. In May, because there is a same party in power that is in the center came around, there were major human rights violations. Christian girls were gang raped in public. Around 500 churches were burnt and destroyed. 200 people were killed. Thousands of Christian houses have been burnt. Over 70,000 people to this day are living in refugee camps. Around 10,000 are children. The state would get bad because winter is beginning to come in Manipur now. Opposition parties shut down the parliament. For many days there were protests, but unfortunately Prime Minister did not move. It pays for him to be indifferent to issues like this because he can raise up the Hindu sentiments. 79% people can vote for him and he can get re-elected again in March. So every time there is election, you find communal riots happening in India. As you would know, US has very strong religious freedom track record. They have something called Commission for Religious Freedom. Human rights violations and religious freedom issues are foreign policy sensitivities in the United States. And this commission advises the president to impose sanctions on countries that severely violate religious freedoms in the countries. But unfortunately, they have made India as country of particular concern number of times. But the president doesn't want to move on these issues because India is geopolitically very important to America. Researchers have shown around the world wherever there is a majority religion and authoritarian regime, human rights violations take place. India has pretty much same. India is no different when it comes to things like this. 5 minutes, I'll finish it much faster. I guess the only way to deal with this, a greater engagement with India. We should engage at our civil society level. We should engage at government level. And that will help minimize the loss of freedom there. I would end with a quote from President Reagan. That is, freedom is never more than a generation away. I repeat, freedom is never more than a generation away from extinction. We did not pass it to our children in the bloodstream. It must be fought for, protected, and handed on to them to do the same, or one day we'll spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it was once like in the United States when men were free. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Malik. We appreciate your contributions. When we think of India as a secular state, there's been just tremendous transformation over the last 15 years or so. And we, at our center, think a lot about the situation of religious minorities in that country. We have good friends who are Muslims who have been fierce defenders of the Indian model of secularism. But about 15 years ago, they began saying, we're feeling nervous. And about 10 years ago, they began saying, I'm feeling uneasy. And about 5 years, they began saying, now I'm scared. And to see that sort of transition from sort of fierce advocacy to feeling frightened in one's own country has been very sobering. And thank you also for highlighting the state of Manipur. We don't hear much about that in the United States, but more than 500 Christian churches have been destroyed in the last year. And as Bernard explained, hundreds killed, thousands of houses burned. I had not heard that number, 70,000 in IDP camps. That's incredibly sobering. And it gives us just a sense of how difficult it is even to be aware sometimes of the significant persecution that people suffer in places that we might not even be able to find on a map. When I say we, I mean me. But thank you for being here, and thank you for helping us understand the situation. You know, when I heard Ronald Reagan say that freedom is never more than a generation away from extinction, I was a young man, and I thought he was exaggerating. Now I'm a much older man, and I see that he was exactly right, because we can see generational changes in our societies and in the world, and certain things that we thought were uncontestable become contested, and what we thought was shared commitment we see also can come under threat. So thank you for recalling that for us as well. Our final speaker in this session is Professor Paul Rowe, a professor of political and international studies at Trinity Western University in British Columbia, Canada. He serves as the director of the Religion in Canada Institute and is a senior research fellow at the International Institute for Religious Freedom in Vancouver. He teaches in the fields of international and developing world politics and specializes in the politics of religious minorities in the Middle East and South Asia. He is the editor of the Routledge Handbook of Minorities in the Middle East, as well as other books. What some in this group may not know is that Trinity Western is a religiously affiliated university with an honor code which is in many ways very similar to the honor code we have here at Brigham University. And we have been friends and colleagues of Trinity Western University over the last 20 years, as they have really been subject to not just pressure, not just discrimination, but really what amounts to religious persecution in a country that is normally thought of as sort of very liberal and freedom-loving. So Paul, thank you for being here, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Scharffs, and to all of the organizers. I'm very impressed with all that you put together here. I wish we had the resources that you have here to do some of the same things at our institution. I realize that I speak on 3 different levels, potentially. I am a Canadian citizen, and I could speak to what's going on in the Canadian environment. I am also, as Dr. Scharffs just mentioned, a professor at Trinity Western University, which makes me something of an object that could be discussed as well when it comes to issues of religious freedom. But primarily, I'm an academic, and I spend my time researching the politics of religious minorities in the Middle East and in South Asia, as we've just heard about. And those are going to be that's going to be where I'm going to comment today primarily, but I'm happy to talk as all 3 of those things. So 75 years after the passage of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, there are both reasons for optimism and pessimism about the future of human rights. The human rights specifically to religious freedom. Numerous organizations and governments have successfully promoted the cause of religious freedom in the past 2 decades. There have been several big successes, such as the U.S. government's International Religious Freedom Act and the establishment of the Commission on International Religious Freedom, as well as similar efforts to enshrine religious freedom in the foreign policies of other states as well. The plight of specific religious minorities has gained the spotlight. One thinks of the Rohingya of Myanmar or the Yazidis and Christians of northern Iraq, on whose behalf international organizations have been involved. We have held major international gatherings that feature religious freedom, such as the first and second ministerials here in the United States to advance religious freedom in 2018 and 2019. And the R20 gathering on the edges of the G20 summit in Bali places restored, albeit in very small numbers. Protests in Iran reflect the reality of questioning and free thought among the populace, even if that is not yet translated into a more tolerant regime. Nevertheless, I think there are multiple major challenges to the promotion of religious freedom today that are gaining ground and making it increasingly difficult to gain bipartisan and multi-partisan, in other contexts, action in support of religious freedom. And some of the observations I have to make here derive from or are related to a roundtable contribution that I made to the International Journal of Middle Eastern Studies last year. My examples, however, are both global and regional. When religious freedom initiatives reach executive priority lists, this would usually mean that their champions might move the dial forward. So it was good to see President Donald Trump's administration recognize the importance of religious freedom in the 2018 and 2019 ministerials that I mentioned. However, the lack of follow-through under the Biden administration only seems to underscore the idea that this is a Republican priority. In Canada, in my country, the decision to eliminate the Office of International Religious Freedom under the current Liberal administration in 2015 underscored an apparent assumption that this was a priority for other parties, but not for the governing party of our country. The other significant champion of especially Christian communities rebuilding in northern Iraq is the government of Hungary, which is a noted standard bearer of conservative authoritarianism in Europe. And the prioritization of the R20 summit in 2022 was the Indonesian government and Nahdlatul Ulama, which stand as rivals for the leadership of the Muslim community against more conservative governments, such as those of Pakistan or Saudi Arabia. So in Middle Eastern context, the survival of Christian communities in locations such as Syria and Egypt seem to reinforce the notion that conservative authoritarian administrations are their greatest benefactors. This pits the conversation in favor of religious freedom against the larger promotion of freedom of religion and belief and democracy in the region. Each of these examples demonstrate to me the danger that religious freedom becomes a niche issue for particular political agendas or partisan groups. Even the perception of partisanship seems problematic. I don't think it's fair to think that it's partisan in all of these cases, but the perception is problematic. Another issue to me is bureaucratic obstacles. When bureaucracies and bureaucrats are convinced that the religious freedom file is politicized, or even just that one party is more committed to the cause than another, it contributes to them taking the matter less seriously. The bureaucratic obstacles are mentioned, for example, in Stephen Rasch's recent book entitled The Disappearing People, where he notes the ways in which the US State Department and US aid officials ran interference against Vice President Pence's championing of the reconstruction efforts in northern Iraq. One official from state argued that sponsoring faith communities violated the Establishment Clause and apparently refused to take the initiative seriously. In implementation, both USAID and UNDP programs favored contractors outside the minority communities and pursued projects tokenistically. Civil servants in the foreign affairs departments of numerous Western states remain largely unseized or ignorant of interest in religious freedom issues, in spite of the Herculean efforts of some ambassadors, one of whom is here with us today, and private groups with an interest in the field. Another issue that we've just heard about from my colleague here is the growth of religious nationalism and the recoding of religious freedom. Religious nationalism has become a rising force in numerous countries, and one might expect religious adherents to promote some level of religious freedom. After all, religious freedom should help to promote their cause. But the rise of religious nationalism tends to go hand in hand with religious majoritarianism, as we've just heard. Russia's embrace of religion favors the Russian Orthodox Church even against other Orthodox leaders, as in the case of Ukraine, where the invasion has reinforced religious dividing lines between the Russian Patriarchate and the independent Ukrainian Russian Orthodox Church. The rise of the Bharatiya Janata Party in India has come to separate the causes of religious resurgence and religious freedom. The BJP champions ironically titled Religious Freedom Acts in various states, and potentially, in the future, at the center, that would seek to limit the ability to convert. Okay, Religious Freedom Act, literally referred to as a Religious Freedom Act, that is intended to limit the ability to convert. This on top of their direct rhetorical and in many cases violent targeting of Muslims, Christians, and in some cases Sikhs, evinces the inability of the BJP to match their concern for religious freedom of Hindus with that of others. Finally, I think the last thing I'd really like to focus in on is scholars who have argued that religious freedom is too easily reified or misused. The topics of religious freedom have been noticed by scholars in new ways, largely because of a new generation of scholarship in both international law and religion that grew up in the wake of 2001. For example, my own organization, the International Institute for Religious Freedom, now publishes a biennial journal called the, two times a year journal, the International Journal for Religious Freedom. So perhaps not surprisingly, there has been something of a backlash against religious freedom as an agenda in scholarship. Many scholars suggest that some of the problems I've already identified make the idea of religious freedom too problematic to pursue in a coherent way. They seem almost to want to throw out the notion in favor of the notion of religious freedom in favor of alternative ways to frame the narrative. For example, Elizabeth Shackman Hurd has been a vocal critic of the use of religious freedom in international affairs. In works such as Beyond Religious Freedom, she's argued that traditional forms of religion and the category of religion has been privileged in our pursuit of religious freedom. Her point is that the pursuit of religious freedom needs to be understood in the broader context of promotion of human rights and freedoms with an open mind to the definition of religion. The late Saba Mahmood, who wrote influentially as well on religious freedom issues in the Egyptian context, argued that it's wrong to assume, here I'm quoting, that religious liberty and minority rights are simply neutral legal instruments that protect certain groups or individuals, unquote. She argued that secular states that called out minorities for their difference were inadequate to their protection and that there was an inevitability to the politicization of religious freedom as a neoliberal agenda. Indeed, in the Egyptian context, she argues that religious freedom narrative tends to strengthen the role of the Coptic Orthodox Church against other independent religious movements, in itself limiting the expansion of religious freedom to nonconformists. Notably, Stephen Rash, who I mentioned earlier, makes a similar point about Hungary's support of the official churches, which they deemed to be the only viable partners for reconstruction in northern Iraq. Now, the problem that I see with scholarship that seeks to contextualize religious freedom is not that they're making bad points, but that it often serves further to stereotype or to repoliticize the efforts to release believers from persecution, efforts that ultimately undermine international commitments to the cause. So what lessons should we take from these challenges? Advocates of religious freedom must double down in the coming years before the 100th anniversary of the UDHR. The critiques and obstacles to the promotion of religious freedom are manifold. We scholars and advocates of religious freedom must take seriously some of the criticisms that the religious freedom advocates are selective, for example, or promote a dual agenda that appears to be conservative or right-wing. Secondly, we scholars and advocates must contend with the fact that minority religious movements often shelter in the wings of authoritarian regimes. Calls for democracy without adequate liberal protections for the rights of minorities commonly lead to majoritarian tyranny. This drives minority populations toward despots who respect neither democracy nor liberal protections that extend to all citizens. And this is a serious dysfunction that should be concerning to those of us who promote religious freedom. While I expect this might be controversial, I'd say also that religious identity and all forms of nationalism should be decoupled. My own vision for this is the promotion of religious pluralism rather than a doctrinaire version of secularism. But the blurring of the line between national and religious identity presents one of the greatest modern threats, in my view, to religious freedom from religious nationalist movements themselves. Finally, Notwithstanding the concerns of how we promote religious freedom, the essential importance of freedom of religion and belief to a healthy and functional society must remain the focus of scholars and advocates of religious freedom. We must continue the fight. Thank you.
Paul, thank you for that wide-ranging and extremely insightful survey of what's happening around the world and some of the trends we see. I think this phenomenon of religious nationalism we're seeing in the countries you mentioned, but in many others as well. We have a variation of it in the United States. There's a severe and dystopian version in Myanmar of Buddhist nationalism that's sort of aligned itself with the military and the coup that has stopped the democracy of Myanmar, at least temporarily. These are sobering things, and thank you also for mentioning the Canadian Office of Ambassador for Religious Freedom. The one and only holder of that office is here with us, Reverend Andrew Bennett, and when the new government came in, they decided to do exactly what you've described, which is to contextualize religious freedom within other human rights, which is an important insight and an important part of promoting religious freedom. But unfortunately, it can also mean that it's never heard from again. And so we want to be sort of thoughtful about what even well-intentioned and fine-sounding initiatives can have. We have lunch at 12:30, but we all know how to get there, and it's only a 5-minute walk. So I'm going to do what I did like others doing, which is let the session run over slightly. And I just want to give each of our panelists an opportunity to answer the same question that our colleague Amy Andrews presented to the religious leaders this morning, which is any grounds for optimism? What is happening that is positive or that we can help make positive that gives you hope for the future? And let's just move back towards me. So Bernard, let's begin with you, and then Dr. Doe, and then Professor Rowe.
Yes, definitely. In the context of India, though BJP has been ruling there for 9.5 years, there is a very strong opposition. And opposition held up the parliament for days until Prime Minister made a statement. Your effort here is also a positive outcome. As long as you bring people together for dialogue, as you bring people and give them awareness, I think all these tools give us a greater hope. It's always there, to see the darkness, you need to have light. Otherwise, you don't realize you're in dark or the other way around too. That is why if we had sun every day and it did not rain, we would have a problem. So I think this world is made up of good and bad people. And you will see, history is witness to this, that regimes that have really done so bad have been replaced. And so I think there is a tremendous hope as long as people are talking about these things, as long as people are willing to sacrifice, whether it's their life or their livelihood or whatever it is, to pay a price, things would change.
Thank you. Your comments remind me that years ago I heard a description of China as calm on the surface and tumultuous beneath the surface, and India as tumultuous on the surface and calm underneath. And perhaps there are reservoirs of democratic sentiment and intention in India that will assert themselves. Dr. Doe, grounds for optimism.
Thưa các bạn, nếu mà nói về vấn đề này thì
Dear delegate,
regarding optimism, I believe
người Việt người Việt người Việt Nam cũng như là ở Đông Nam Á đấy.
the Vietnamese people and the people living in Southeast Asia, there are many things. There's many hope and many thought and many concerns that we have.
Biết đến cái từ gọi là nhân phẩm.
You know, our people just learn about human dignity written about 1953 or 54. It is very important that in certain area,
Cái con người ấy,
people,
personality ấy mà nó chưa
personalities, many need to be materialized. Yeah. Yeah. There are many countries who are better than us and countries that still working on just like us.
tôi thấy ở Việt Nam chúng tôi
In our country, Vietnam, the people, especially the minorities, now for the first time, they were able to hear about their right to be unique, and the government protect them.
trước đây người ta chỉ có một cái
Before, they are just like a piece of sand. They are nobody.
quyền đặc biệt này đâu. Trong
They never able to dream of that.
kiểu khía cạnh khác ấy, nếu
Another aspect I would like to share
cộng đồng mà
that in a community,
nó có
if there is
giáo nó cao
religious,
thật là khó
yeah,
để mà nghĩ được đến những cái cộng đồng này. Cái tính tôn giáo cao nó không chỉ
if there's a community with high religions, then there will be many extremist people that, especially in Indonesia, with the experience I've been there, the people in Indonesia, the women in Indonesia, after so many efforts, they fight for a woman's right. Now they have the right to drive a car.
tôi nghĩ con người ta bao giờ có quyền hy vọng và điều quan trọng
We all have hope. We all have dignity
cái khả năng mới
and ability.
nhân loại thì cái vũ trụ luận nó sẽ thay đổi và lối sống nó sẽ
Yeah, that it will help change our life and our society. I believe that no matter which government regimes, there will be a solution for self and for the people.
The interpretation, I think the reference was to Saudi Arabia on women and driving. Dr. Do, there are very few countries in the world for which I feel greater optimism than Vietnam. So we're grateful to have you here. Paul, the last word is yours.
I think I'm often faulted for being a pessimist far better than I am an optimist, but I will dig deep. I think my reason for optimism is that the very thing that you mentioned earlier, generational change is a real thing. And generational change can have negative repercussions, but it can also have really positive repercussions. The things that drove policy 15 years ago are not driving policy today. For example, I think there's been very rapid cultural change. Anyone in the United States knows that there's been very rapid cultural change in the politics of this country. And the same thing happens in other countries. The fact that my own university faced the Supreme Court twice in less than 20 years, less than a generation, and we got two totally different verdicts from that court, says that there can be very significant and radical change. Not in our favor in that case, but there can be radical change. So the preoccupations of the past 20 years will not be the preoccupations of the next 20 years. And I'm hopeful that that can make a difference in a lot of different countries. It can make a difference in a place like Vietnam. It can make a difference in, for example, Uzbekistan, Central Asia. It can make a difference in very significant ways in a lot of different places. And I hope that next generations will have a renewed commitment to religious freedom.
Thank you very much. Let me ask you to join me in thanking our panelists.